Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness Podcast, exploring the inner reaches of the heart and mind, brought to you by Rangjung Yeshe Gomde, Germany-Austria, and your host, Erric Solomon.
Welcome to a special episode of the Kind Heartfulness Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a bit different from our usual format. Instead of our regular host, Erric Solomon, asking the questions, he'll be the one answering them. My name is Sara Hindelang, I'm 24 years old and I'm a long-term volunteer and team member here at Gomde, Germany-Austria. In this episode, I'll be having a conversation with our dear Erric and asking him questions that could be relevant to people who are new to the Dharma or interested in it. Today, we're also especially considering the recently launched project of Jökyi Rinpoche, the Dharma Gyan Youth, having young people in mind. Erric Solomon is a noted author, Buddhist teacher and meditator, drawing from decades of Buddhist practice as well as experience in Silicon Valley, and with a keen sense of humor, Erric speaks with authenticity grounded in experience. He bridges the gap between modern insight and ancient wisdom, having studied under the guidance of great masters like Kyabkyo Toku Ogen Rinpoche and Jökyi Rinpoche. Additionally, he completed a 3-year traditional retreat, adding depth to his understanding from authentic experience rather than just intellectual knowledge. Erric is also the co-author with Patrick Rinpoche of Radically Happy, a user's guide to the mind. Yeah, so let's dive into this insightful conversation with Erric Solomon. Hi, Erric. So nice having you here in today's episode of the Kind Heartfulness Podcast of Gomde. As you already heard, Jökyi Rinpoche recently started this new project for young people under the age of 35 for contemplating and getting to know the Buddhist teachings better and having a space to exchange. And since we also started to launch something similar here in Gomde, Austria, with a small group of young people who are interested and also spend some time already in Gomde, we maybe wanted to talk about this at the beginning and then see what questions can come up from that.
Okay, well, you're the host.
So, as I already said, dear teacher Jökyi Rinpoche launched this Dharma Gyan project where people all over the world in different centers get together and have a platform where they can look at Buddhist teachings, but also have more like of an open space where they can contemplate and discuss them more openly. And I think especially these days when there are so many crises we are faced, it's really helpful for people to have a deeper meaning or like to get to know some philosophies with deeper meaning. How do you see this connection with facing troublesome times and dealing with with them in a Buddhist context?
Well, let me ask you a question first before I answer, which is, why do you think there's some reason to have a group that's specifically aimed at younger people?
Yeah, I think now with my experience of being here in Gomde for some time, it's really nice to have this exchange throughout all different generations, but especially within younger people, to just have some space to be able to discuss like maybe some situations you're facing related to the current life situation that differs from generation to generation. And like if you have maybe people have ecoanxiety or like they're really worried about what's going on in the environment. And I think
all the Buddhists don't care about the environment as well.
Yeah, different. Yeah.
I think it's different.
A little bit different, I think.
How's it different?
I mean, young people are more faced with the consequences of whatever happened in the previous times. So they are not so much the cause, like they are also especially the cause for what's going on, but the more faced with the consequences, I think.
I think what you're trying to say is that a lot of the damage has already been done in many cases before many of the young people were born. And then second, just odds are they're going to outlive people who are much older, and so they'll be having to deal with the consequences of that. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, that hits the spot.
Yeah, I mean that's true. When I talk to, I I have, as you know, when you come to my seminars, I tend to have more young people there than in uh, Buddhist gatherings in general, or Tibetan Buddhist gatherings in general, and in modern Dharma centers. And it's true, a lot of people who are, say, are younger are much more likely to be talking about their anxiety around what's happening to the planet. That's my experience as well.
Hmm. Where do you see the potential, like where Buddhist philosophies or like the ancient wisdom that's within it can maybe help these young people?
Well, I have a little trouble talking about ancient wisdom because
Yeah.
although I'm older, I'm not ancient. And I think what I can say is that what Buddhism, one of the key teachings of Buddhism is reflecting on interconnectedness, on reflecting on how what I do affects you. What you do also affects me. What we do together affects, the entire universe. It all has, everything is connected to everything else. There is no kind of independent existence any existence that you can talk about is a kind of interdependent existence. There's no in Buddhism, at least, there's no meaning to talk about existence as separate from the world, from the inhabitants of the world, from the universe. It's meaningless, and I think that's that's stressed in Buddhism. I think we see in modern science or these kinds of things also that's clearly the view. So, what we do has consequences.
Mm.
Right? And what we're doing to the planet has some benefits. Of course, there's been marvelous advances in scientific understanding of the body, and people live almost 2 lifetimes now compared to, say, 150 years ago, and that's a lot of that has to do with better understanding of hygiene, remarkable advances in surgical procedures, vaccines. I know that's probably very controversial for some people, but I like to say vaccines cause adults. That just at least we can say, maybe for the ones that were traditionally given, that protected all kinds of terrible childhood consequences of childhood diseases that used to kill. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember hearing about people dying of measles. You don't really hear that anymore, right? Like, anyway, not to dwell on that. It's fair to say that there's been, that there are great benefits to a lot of our, the revolution, you can say, in technology and medical science. But some of the downsides are we haven't really paid attention to the effects of how we live on the environment. And so Buddhism talks a lot about respecting interconnectedness.
And in this connection, like, I see the point of interconnectedness, of like how raising the awareness there could really help our understanding in how we relate to the world and the environment. But how would you relate to this part of the anxiety, like how young people can maybe deal better with anxiety?
Well, there's two things. I mean, one thing is just each of us as a person, we have a mind. And this is what Buddhism talks about. This is what makes Buddhism as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. And that is, we all have a mind, And we can work with this mind. We have a choice. We can be just completely carried away by our habits, which nowadays we call neuroses, right? We can be completely carried away by that. Or we can take agency over our mind, over, you can say, spiritual path, but we don't have to use such big fancy words. Just, we can take agency over our mind. We can take responsibility for it. We can learn to own our mind. It's our mind. It's the most intimate relationship we have in our life is with our own mind. And yet, habitually, we're always looking out at the things happening in the world rather than where it happens. And where it happens for us is in our mind. They're not saying that there aren't things, that people aren't polluting the planet. And of course, that's happening. But where we experience that is in our mind. Mm-hmm. Where the anxiety comes is in our mind. And so we're really, really fortunate that not only did Buddha teach an innumerable number of methods for how to work with our minds, but that hasn't been lost, that we can still find today people who've mastered their mind, who understand it so well that they can teach now to others how they can master their own mind, their own heart. When I say mind, also heart and mind come together. They're not from you can say a traditional Buddhist point of view, those are not separate things. So there's that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, we can, out of a great fundamental concern for the planet, for the welfare of others, we can become active. We can become active in a number of different ways. It can be something simple, like just looking at your own life and saying, how can I reduce my carbon footprint? Are there things I can do to reduce my carbon footprint? Most of us living in Europe or the United States or any kind of wealthy country use more than our fair share. Right? So, even many of us who are quite concerned about the environment, if we're really honest with ourselves, we use more than our fair share. So what can we personally do? And then also, are there things we can do, participate in general public sphere to make a difference? And those, it could be becoming politically active in some way, for example. But it needs to be done as much as possible out of love rather than anger. Because here's the thing, when it comes out of love, our own anxiety, our relationship to our anxiety is very different. When it comes out of anger, it almost like fuels the anxiety. It gives the anxiety even more room to flourish, if you will. But when we do it out of love, when we feel love is a really interesting kind, and I don't mean romantic love, although that's a kind of love, and it's also true with romantic love. But I just so fundamentally, deeply care for the world around me, for the people in it, that everyone flourishes, that it's like, out of that kind of concern, what's interesting is our anxiety lessens. If we think about times in our life where we've been quite okay as opposed to anxious, tendency is when we're quite anxious is we're very, very focused on our three favorite subjects, I, me, and mine, right? And when we are focused on others, actually those times we have much less anxiety. And it's really interesting. It can even be during times which are otherwise very, very challenging, like someone very close to you gets seriously ill and maybe looks not even totally sure if they're going to ever be okay, right? And when you decide to go in and do what you can to help, to, maybe it's bringing them food or just being there for them when they're going through this difficult time. And of course, you can't really say it was exactly a joyful time, but when you think about it later, it generally feels although there's some sadness, also quite fulfilling. It gives meaning and purpose to our life. And that's because of love. Love brings meaning and purpose into our lives. So here you can say, in a way, I'm giving already a very kind of Buddhist infused view, or Buddhist, it's marinating in Buddhism about how we can begin to, and I don't think this is just for young people. I think anybody could do this. Although the good thing about being young is you have a lot of energy, and you can both work at a full-time job and then have lots of energy to do a whole bunch of other things, and possibly haven't started a family yet, so you have more free time.
Yeah, I think this brings me to another thing that I feel like many people in my closer circle are worrying sometimes, or like arguing when I'm kind of having conversations like this with them. They're saying like, is it even worth like being kind in this cruel world? And like, there's so many bad things going on. Like, what's the point of like being kind and helpful or generous and stuff like this? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think that's a really understandable question. It's actually good that people reflect on that, because, just being kind without having a deep understanding of why, sometimes when things go wrong, it's hard to maintain our composure and to stay true to our principles, right? Most people generally want to be kind and nice to others, most people. But when things start to go wrong, like unexpected challenges that life, inevitably throws at us, it's hard to stay in that space, right? It's normal to start thinking, I've just got to take care of myself and the ones around me, and we become very, very back to I mean mine, I mean mine, I mean mine. So, this is actually how we can work with or contribute positively in the face of all the war that's going on, all this terrible violence right now in the world. We think, oh, that has nothing to do with me. I would never choose to do that. I wouldn't invade that country, or I wouldn't respond, in the way that maybe the Israelis responded to the attack that the Palestinian, Hamas, I should say. Maybe I would do it differently. I mean, I have that reaction, but where is it happening? For us, it's happening in our mind. We're experiencing it. We're not saying there's no war other than in our mind, but for us, the point of contact is our mind. Mm-hmm. That's how we know it. You can't know it outside of your mind. You only know it in your mind, right? You say, I know something. You're talking about something that's happening in your mind. So what you can, in a way, say, and this goes back to interconnectedness, that all this aggression that we're seeing in the world today is the natural consequence. Even though we're good people, we all microaggress. We all have these moments of microaggression, right? So it's like, just think about, maybe you have a really close friend and they're having a bad day. You didn't know that, but maybe they got some horrible news and they're just in a foul mood, and you say something to them, and out of the blue, they turn around and snap at you. They get very grumpy, and you don't know why. Later you find out, but you feel a little hurt, right? And now you're in a bad mood. And then somebody comes to you, and because you're still processing, why did my dear friend talk to me in such a messed up way, right? And they say something to you, and then you, actually, without meaning to, are a little grumpy with them. All of us, if we're honest, we all do this from time to time. Those are little microaggressions. And it's like, because, now we all understand a lot about viruses and how they spread and everything. This is like a virus, because our microaggression, and we're all microaggressing, it gets transferred to the next person, the next person, the next person, and then eventually it builds up into macroaggression, into war, into where people find there's no other solution than extreme acts of violence. And so if we want the world to change, occasionally there's something we can do that can have a really profound effect in the world. There are people, like some great politicians from the past, have made important decisions and taken action that changed the world for the better. So it is possible that one person can make a huge difference. But we don't always get that opportunity. We're not always in that place. But at least we can start to microaggress less. I mean, no need to say about macroaggression. Please don't be violent, right? Anyone who listens to this, I think we all get that. We shouldn't be violent. But even our mini violence, which is just a nasty look or being sarcastic to someone in a way that makes them feel hurt, if we can begin to catch ourselves before we do it, that's a virus. And then we can turbocharge it. How? By actually being loving and kind, because that's a virus. When we've all had the experience of someone on the street who we don't know is unusually kind to us out of the blue, and it changes our day. And then we meet someone else and we're unreasonably happy or happy for no reason. And that communicates. The other person walks away and feels better. At the very least, they don't feel worse, right?
Yeah.
And so you see this is, you can say, the logic of love, the logic of kindness, the logic of understanding, empathy, compassion, of why it's so important in this world at this time that we all take responsibility. Don't think that what's going on, you have nothing to do with it. We all have something to do with it, even though we would make different choices, right? I would never, if I had the power, I'd never support the invasion of another country to satisfy my political aims, okay? I shouldn't say never, but because maybe there are times historically probably it was even a good idea because the atrocities were so bad. But generally speaking, I wouldn't do it, right? Over just a political difference. But if I think that I have nothing to do with it, it's denying interdependence. It's denying my own power, my agency in this situation, that each of us can make a difference. We can change the world. It's possible. But how? By being as kind, generous, loving, patient, compassionate, understanding as we possibly can. Or at least refrain from microaggression. I don't even need to mention macroaggression. So that's, my experiences with younger people is it's really worth it, because when you're young, you don't believe in your habits as being you quite so solidly. You have habits, but you still think, I can change, because you're still in a part of life where you as a person are dynamically changing all the time. It's a sad thing. As you age, you get more accepting of this is how I am. And it is harder to change. Of course, everyone can change. You have to have the motivation. And so, actually, one of the reasons that Patrick Rinpoche and I wrote Radically Happy was exactly the issue we're talking about. And in particular, we imagined a lot of our younger friends. I mean, Patrick Rinpoche has, many of his students are quite young. And we thought about them a lot. We started by thinking about ourselves and the family, and then our students, and people come to our seminars and so forth. And so really, if you want to save the planet, I think you have to really, really think of, can we help people who are in their 20s to maybe early 30s? What tools can we give them? How can we support them? Because in 15 years, those people are going to be running the planet. I hope. I really hope. Enough of these old white men, old men in general. I think we should have I look forward to a new generation taking over. Yeah. But I think we have to help all of us, each other, support each other in making this kind of inner transformation, because then the outer transformation will begin to automatically happen.
That's really beautiful. And do you have any like more concrete maybe advices or something like that, how these people that you just talked about could really put it into action? Like,
So this is where I'm going to say you need to go to a seminar, or you need to go at least read a book. I mean, of course, I'm partial to Radically Happy, no doubt. But for example, one of the great teachers of loving kindness practice, Sharon Salzberg, has written a number of really mind-blowingly good books and the thing that's wonderful about Sharon is she really embodies what she teaches. And so I feel quite comfortable saying that you have to practice responding with love. Responding with, and love here we mean what's sometimes called loving kindness, metta, and compassion or karuna. And that those become the way that, like a story from the book Radically Happy that I gave is when I used to commute in Silicon Valley, really, really bad traffic. And somebody would cut me off on the highway. I would get sometimes so upset and I'd drive around weave through traffic to get back in front of them. And if I was having a really bad day, it's terrible. It's embarrassing to admit this, but I would even get in front of them, maybe even pump the brake a little bit, I mean, what a jerk I was. And then, it's like I was sitting in the car, I used to carpool. I mean, means me and a friend would, I don't know if everyone knows what carpooling is, but he would drive one day, I would drive one day. So he's driving and he's telling me about this fascinating algorithm he's working on, which would drastically improve creating bleeding edge computer chips. And, it was actually both his energy was really inspiring, but also what he was saying was like, oh, wow, that's really smart. And all of a sudden, somebody cut him off on the highway. I didn't think he noticed. He just lightly stepped on the brake. It was like I was getting ready to commiserate. Oh, what a jerk that guy is. He didn't even notice. It's like the same action, two completely different experiences. For me, it made me angry and upset. Him, he didn't care. He didn't notice. He just stepped on the brake. And the good news is my wife commented to me a few years ago when someone cut me off. She said, oh, wow, you've really changed. I didn't even notice because I just lightly stepped on the brake, right? So we can change. What we need to do is first practice in our mind. So, for example, they found that, in basketball, shooting hoops, throwing the ball up to the basket, that they actually found that people who just imagine doing that are almost as good as the people who actually do it. So if you spend 20 minutes practicing shooting hoops and 20 minutes imagining shooting hoops, the imagining ones are significantly better than the people who didn't practice or didn't imagine, and almost as good as the people who practiced. So we use in our imagination, imagine sharing love, kindness, with people we care about, then people we don't feel anything one way or the other, and then people who irritate us, and then people who've really harmed us. And it's funny because even in our imagination, it's hard to share that with people who've really harmed us. It's really difficult. Anybody says it isn't, I'm amazed. But you can learn to do it, and you can learn to do it joyfully even eventually. And what's interesting then is then when you unfortunately have to run into people like that, your reaction starts becoming very, very different. But, you have to decide this is important. I'm going to do it. And best is to go to a seminar. Second best is to read a book and then do it. And those are the ways that I know. I mean, you have to say it's important.
Yeah, definitely.
First is the motivation.
Yeah. And this leads me to another question, where you said like go to a seminar, which includes going to a Dharma center or to a practice space.
Yes.
So sometimes people come and they're a little bit surprised, or like they don't know how to like view the rituals or the traditions that are going on. Like, what would you say to these people? How to understand maybe what's going on better, not to feel that it's too strange.
No, I think first of all, it is strange, and to just let it be strange. Um, the reason we do these rituals, what you call rituals, that look very exotic and like from some other culture and all this, is because the people who taught us those rituals have, within a single lifetime, become fully awakened. And so you have to say to yourself, do I want to be like me? Like ensconced and totally under the power of my neuroses, my negative emotions, or do I want to be more like them? And so, you don't have to necessarily do everything all at once right away, but just see that it what's hard to explain in the beginning, but you begin to understand later on, is there's a logic behind it all. And it's a very profound, subtle, and amazing logic underlying the whole reason the rituals are the way they are. But that you can't appreciate on day one, because it's like let's say you want to be a nuclear physicist. Saying I want to be that doesn't make you one. You have to go to school. You have to study really hard for years and years. This isn't quite as difficult as becoming a nuclear physicist. To understand it, to master it, it's more difficult than becoming a nuclear physicist. But to understand it, it's not as difficult. But you do have to apply yourself and spend some time and study. When I was young, I was very fortunate, and I got to ask lots of my teachers all the questions about these things. I was a obnoxious, precocious, insistent guy, and I would go to my teachers and say, why are we doing this? Why do we do it this way? What's the reason? And making sure to clarify my understanding when I had doubts. But that takes time.
Maybe also about this time when you met the Dharma, you were very young, you had the fortune to meet these masters, like you just mentioned. What what tips or what advice would you have for young people who just met the Dharma, maybe from your perspective back then?
Well, there are a few things that are really different. And some of them make things harder and some of them make them easier. So we'll start with the harder things. So when I first encountered the Dharma, actually I was still a teenager. I saw the Dalai Lama at Harvard in 1978. There wasn't as much interest in Buddhism when I was young. So you could meet teachers and there weren't so many other people around. The second thing is that there had been after the Cultural Revolution, which was about, you can say, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years before I started meeting masters, and almost 20 before I started really studying. But the Cultural Revolution forced a lot of these great yogis and yoginis who spent decades in retreat and really matured their understanding and realization, insight. And there were just a lot of them, and it was easy to go see them. So now doesn't seem to be quite as many, although I can't really judge anyone's realization. Just to me, it seems like it's not quite as overflowing as it was back then, but there are still some. I mean, Chögyam Rinpoche's realizations, I'm convinced, really quite as good as anybody's. But so we on the one hand, we don't have that kind of opportunity. On the other hand, when I started, nobody knew what they were doing. There weren't other practitioners around. I think I was telling you the other day that there, like, to me, like somebody who'd been studying and practicing the Dharma for 7 years, that seemed like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And now we don't think 7 years of studying and practicing Dharma is anything special, because we know lots of people who've done it for much longer. So, so now you have a lot of people, while they may not have the realization, they at least have the understanding and a really good heart, and you can learn from them. And then you say a situation like Gomde and many other Dharma centers, which have pretty highly realized gurus, is that you can learn from these Dharma friends, shall we say, that, and then also get the most important instructions from the realized masters who, when they come. So it's, some things are worse and some things are better. You know, it's always funny. It seems like people who are older always talk about the good old days, and it's always been like that. And people, but there's now studies that show everybody idealizes the past in a way that's pretty unrealistic. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say there are opportunities now. And anyway, what difference does it make? We can only talk about the opportunities that there are now. And so, the good news is there are people, when you go to Dharma centers, who, although they may not be highly realized, but who knows, there may be some, we just don't know. They at least understand the practices. They understand the philosophy, and they can share it. And then there are still these great shining lights of wisdom and compassion that come through in this very pure and open way, and we can meet them too.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's really related, because it's kind of the opposite what you were just talking about. But also these days I meet so many people talking about this like self-love and self-improvement hype.
Yeah.
And they're kind of looking for something. They have this feeling like, oh, there's something strange going on. They don't feel comfortable in how things sometimes go with the society. And they're certainly looking for something. Where would you, root them in maybe relation to the Dharma? Like, is there some self-improvement even?
Yeah, I mean, there's some kinds of misunderstanding that can come because we talk a lot about no self, or transcending the self, or the self is an illusion. But actually, to really directly experience that, you have to start with a healthy sense of self. And these days, one of the marvelous things that are available to people that weren't available in ancient times is we have a really, really good psychotherapy. It's part of our milieu now, and so doing things to have a healthy sense of self will help your spiritual path. But you know, what is Buddhism showing us? Buddhism, in a mundane sense, gives us the tools to be fundamentally resilient in the face of chaos. Because where's the chaos? It's in our mind. Doesn't mean there's no outer world of chaos, but you know, we've all had this experience of seeing a friend go through something that seems so horrible, and somehow for them, although they wouldn't wish it on anyone, it was a cathartic, life-changing experience. And yet another friend goes through something very similar, and they spend years in a depression. And so, you know, how can we be more like the first and less like the second case? And I think that you can say Buddhist practice gives you lots of tools, lots of ways to negotiate your mind as it goes through this world, and find that spark of inner resilience. It's actually naturally within all of us. It's just covered up by habits, neuroses, and again, this is good news. Ultimately, we're not victims. Ultimately, we're perfectly pure, perfectly wise, perfectly intelligent, perfectly have a healthy sense of self. That's who we really are. But it's covered up by some stuff, and that stuff is temporary. It can be removed. It can be washed away. And but it's up to us. Buddha can't wave his magic wand, because if he could, he'd have done it already. Your teacher can't do it. No one can do it. It's up to us.
So, what are the main factors do you think that drive this change to be more like this first person you mentioned rather than the second one?
Well, I do think it's what I was saying, having a healthy sense of self. Like, for example, when I think of my own teachers, some of the teachers I met, like, needless to say, Kyabje Tukul Orjin Rinpoche, Kyabje Dino Kensei Rinpoche, but also ones that people haven't heard them, so famous. Or like recently, he is well known. My teacher, Tukul Tundra Rinpoche, passed away, and all of them. When I think of them smiling. I think of them joyful. They weren't depressed. They weren't struggling with their demons constantly. They were just fundamentally okay. And they all went through big difficulties in their lives, enormous difficulties. And yet they're fundamentally okay. Sorry, I think I forget the question.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you already said, like how to stay soft and still stay connected with this fundamentally okayness, how you sometimes put it, despite of facing troubles or maybe feeling a little bit depressed or...
Yeah, there's a difference between sad and depressed. Depressed is it falling into hopelessness. Sad is sometimes an authentic response to the world. You see the difference. It's not that these great masters didn't have emotions. They're actually more engaged. Tukul Orjin was completely engaged with the world. There's no question. Or like think of Chögyam Rinpoche, completely engaged with the world. I wouldn't say Chögyam Rinpoche was free of emotion. It's just not sticky. It's not sticky. It doesn't become hopelessness. It doesn't become depression. Now, depression, I want to be careful here because we say that word, but there are many kinds of depression. Some kinds really are biochemical, and it's important then to take the medicine. And then actually from a Buddhist point of view, we even say that all these different medicines can be just the expression of medicine Buddha. So we don't have to feel like it's a failure. Like there's different kinds of depression, and some of them, it's actually this wonderful success. We can be joyful that there's a medicine we can take, and it really helps and gives us the space, the presence of mind to really make progress in our practice. It's wonderful. And also we can go to therapy, we can do metta and karuna practice. All these things help.
Now you talked about the big, great masters having the emotions or like being able to deal with them, or not just being able, but really working with them. For someone who is really new and struggle with dealing with different kinds of emotions, like the sadness you just mentioned, how can they relate to that?
Don't suppress and don't indulge. That's it. One time Shrona played this string instrument in ancient India, Veena. And he went to Buddha and he said, how should I be in my practice? And Buddha said to him, well, when you play the Veena, how do you get the best sound? When the string is really tight and when the string is really loose? And Shrona said to Buddha, you get the best sound, the string has to be not too tight and not too loose. And Buddha said it's like that. So don't suppress You don't have to fix everything, but don't indulge. Of course, in the context of the podcast, I could go, as you know, and give a whole seminar about this. So that's why I say you have to read a book or come to a seminar.
Mm-hmm.
Come to one of mine. Gomde, Austria. I'm doing it this year in May, and again in May and June, and then again in November. But also, I'm actually trying to plug Gomde, Austria here. And it's a wonderful place to study and practice. But also there are many, wherever you are in the world, there's many, we're blessed that there's still many great teachers and many wonderful places to meet the Dharma and study and practice. And also not just Tibetan Buddhism, it's Zen, Japanese Zen, Chinese Zen, it's Theravada Buddhism. There's many different ways in which the Buddha manifests. So it's very fortunate.
Just because you mentioned it now, the different traditions in Buddhism, what do you think makes the tradition of Gomde unique?
I'm totally biased here. I don't think I'm the right person to ask this, but Tulorjin Rinpoche, he had a vision or a wish, an aspiration. The Cultural Revolution was traumatic, not just for Tibetans, but for everyone who went through it. But one thing was that at that time, they weren't sure the Dharma was really going to survive. And so, like people like Chukyi Rinpoche, who wanted to do a really long retreat when he was young, and Karmapa told him, no, you can't. You have to establish a monastery in Nepal, you and your brother, and then you should teach as many people from foreign lands as you possibly can, and these kinds of things. They were really worried or concerned that without a serious effort, that this living tradition of wisdom and compassion that's been handed from master to disciple for centuries and centuries could just disappear. So Gomde, Austria is the manifestation of one of Tulorjin Rinpoche's aspirations. Tulorjin Rinpoche was simply one of the most amazing people I ever met. And it's actually because of him that I didn't, you can say, stray. I was young, really lots of interesting things to do in life and people to meet and so forth. And so, but because Tulorjin was so obviously not of this world, although you could meet him in this world, and completely aware and functioning in this world, but it was like, who knew a human being could be like that? And so that was quite something for me. And so for me, what makes Gomde unique is it's a manifestation of Rinpoche's wisdom mind, and that Chukyi Rinpoche worked tirelessly to, while doing so many other things, to bring about this fabulous place in Austria, which to my surprise is one of my favorite places on earth. So maybe this is good.
Yes, that sounds really wonderful. Thank you for explaining it that way. It really makes it so meaningful to also bring it back to the lineage and to Tulorjin Rinpoche's vision and connect it over Chukyi Rinpoche to our place here in Austria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sara, for asking all these questions and being gracious to take on the job of guest host. I think maybe sometime you can try it when I'm not around.
No, I'm really grateful that we had the opportunity to talk, that we also hear now more from your side, because it's nice that you most of the time ask questions to the interesting hosts that you have, but it's really interesting to also hear what you have to say. I'm grateful for that.
Well, thank you, Sara. I had a wonderful time, and Yeah, and let's do it again sometime.
Yes, thank you. It would be wonderful. There are many more questions, I think.
Very good.
Okay.
See you.
See you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, we like to invite you to continue the journey into the heart of enlightened mind at gomde.eu.